The morning Margaret Holloway decided something had to change. She was standing in her own kitchen holding a phone she had just hung up on her son. It was a Tuesday in early November. Portland was doing what Portland did in November. Rain coming sideways off the West Hills, the kind that didn't fall so much as materialize, appearing on your coat and your eyelashes without you ever seeing it arrive. Maggie stood at the kitchen counter with the phone still warm in her hand and looked around the room she had lived in for 32 years. The walls were the color of old terracotta. She had mixed the paint herself in 1994, standing in the hardware store on Burnside with two small children pulling at her coat, trying to find the exact shade of the canyon she and Robert had driven through on their honeymoon. The curtains were faded now, the hem unraveling on the left side where she kept meaning to re-sew it. On the counter near the coffee maker, partially hidden by a stack of mail she hadn't sorted in 2 weeks, was a stain the color of weak tea, the ghost of a coffee spill Connor had made when he was 13 years old, reaching across the counter for the cereal box with the confidence of someone who had never broken anything in his life, right up until that moment. She had scrubbed at it for years. Eventually, she had stopped scrubbing. The stain had become part of the kitchen the way everything eventually became part of everything, given enough time. Connor's voice was still in her head. Controlled, professional, the voice he used in depositions. "Mom, Diane and I have been talking. There's a really excellent senior living community in Scottsdale. They have a pool, a wellness center, an ocean. Well, a lake view. We're in Portland, Connor. We don't have oceans or lakes in Scottsdale." "Mom, I have to go. Someone's at the door." There was no one at the door. She had simply run out of ways to stay in the conversation. She set the phone on the counter next to the coffee stain and looked out the kitchen window at the backyard. The garden had gone to seed years ago. After Robert died, she had stopped planting things, because planting things required believing in the season ahead, and for a long time she hadn't been able to manage that. The raised beds he had built from cedar planks in 2008 were still there, geometric and patient, waiting for someone to decide to try again. She was 58 years old. She had raised 2 children alone after her husband died. She had kept this house standing through 1 income, 2 recessions, a leaking roof, a cracked foundation wall, and a furnace that gave up in January of 2019. She was not fragile. She was not confused. She was not ready for Scottsdale. But standing in the kitchen that Tuesday morning, she understood something that she hadn't quite let herself understand before. She was lonely in a way that had gone so deep it had stopped hurting, the way a bruise stops hurting when it's had long enough to go numb. 3 days later, she was at Portland International Airport watching her flight to Boston disappear from the departures board. Canceled. The word blinked in red. Outside the terminal windows, the sky was the color of old pewter, and the rain was no longer polite. She had been planning this trip for 6 weeks. 2 weeks with Lily, her first real visit in 18 months, long enough that she had stopped counting in months and started counting in seasons. She had packed a bag, baked 2 dozen hand pies from the recipe her mother had given her, wrapped them carefully in parchment. She had been at the gate 40 minutes early, which was how she had discovered that the flight no longer existed. The terminal was full of the particular restless energy of disrupted travel, families reconfiguring their logistics in real time, businessmen on phones, voices pitched between authority and pleading, 2 children running in circles around a support column while their father stared at a laptop with the expression of a man who had given up. Everyone had somewhere to be and no way to get there, and the energy of all those frustrated intentions filled the space like pressure. Maggie found an empty row of seats near the windows and sat down. The hand pies were getting cold in her bag. She thought about calling Lily, decided to wait until she knew something definite to say. She thought about calling Connor, decided against it entirely. It was in that interval, sitting with her coat still buttoned, her carry-on at her feet, watching Portland disappear into the rain outside, that she saw the girl. She was in the far corner of the gate area, half hidden behind one of the concrete columns, as if she had chosen the spot specifically to be difficult to notice. She was young, mid-20s maybe, with dark hair pulled back and the kind of stillness that isn't peace, but is rather the practiced containment of someone who has learned not to take up more space than absolutely necessary. A baby was strapped against her chest in a faded blue carrier, head tucked under the girl's chin, apparently asleep despite the noise. On the girl's lap was a thick textbook, the spine cracked from use, the pages bristling with colored sticky notes. Maggie looked at the title, Robbins and Cotran Pathologic Basis of Disease, third-year medical school material. She watched for a few minutes. The girl read with one hand, the other arm curved around the baby even while the carrier held him secure, the unconscious doubling of protection that mothers learn without being taught. A woman in a business suit walked past and angled her rolling bag wide, the way people angle away from things they don't want to engage with. An older couple nearby gathered their things and moved to a different row when the baby shifted and made a small sound. The girl didn't look up. She had the practiced invisibility of someone who had been made to feel invisible enough times that she had simply accepted it as a condition of the world. Maggie stood up and walked over. "Excuse me," she said, stopping a respectful distance away. "I don't mean to intrude. Are you all right?" The girl looked up. Her eyes were dark brown and careful, intelligent and guarded in equal measure, the eyes of someone running a rapid calculation about whether this stranger represented help or one more complication she didn't have the resources to manage. "I'm fine," she said. "Thank you." "You don't have to be," Maggie said. "Fine, I mean. I'm not going to give you a brochure or call anyone. I just thought—" She gestured at the empty seat beside her. "I've been sitting over there by myself for 20 minutes and my flight is canceled. You look like yours might be too." A pause. Then carefully, "I don't have a flight." "Ah," Maggie said. "May I sit down anyway?" Another pause. Then the girl moved her bag 6 inches to make room. Her name was Sophia Navarro. She was 26 years old, from Albuquerque originally, had come to Portland for medical school at Oregon Health and Science University 3 years ago. The baby's name was Owen. He was 5 months old. His father had left when Sophia was 4 months pregnant. Not dramatically, not with a scene, just gradually and then completely, the way water drains. Her scholarship had been tied to full-time enrollment. When she'd taken a medical leave after Owen was born, the scholarship had not followed her. Her family in New Mexico loved her, but had nothing to offer except love, which didn't cover rent in Portland. She was at the airport, she explained, because a friend in Seattle had offered her a couch to sleep on. She'd been going to take the bus, but this morning the friend had sent a text. "Sorry, it's not a good time." She said all of this in a level voice, without self-pity, the way you describe events that have simply happened to you and that you have decided to metabolize without drama because drama costs energy you don't have. "Where will you go tonight?" Maggie asked. Sophia looked at the window. "There's a shelter I've used before, St. Anthony's on Burnside. They're usually full by 8, so I need to get there early." "And if they're full?" "Owen and I manage," she said. The particular dignity in those 3 words, I and Owen and manage in that order, hit Maggie somewhere she hadn't expected. She sat with it for a moment, looked at the textbook, looked at the baby sleeping against Sophia's chest with the absolute trust of someone who has been told, by every experience of his short life, that this particular person will not drop him. "I have a house," Maggie said. Sophia looked at her. "In Portland, on Westover Hill. I've been away for a few days, and I was about to be away for 2 more weeks. She heard herself speaking and made no effort to stop. "It's empty. You could stay there, you and Owen, until I get back and then we'll figure out the rest." "I can't," Sophia said immediately. "You don't know me." "You're right, but anyone who reads that," Maggie nodded at the Robins and Catran, "in an airport with a 5-month-old strapped to her chest isn't someone who gives up easily. And that's the kind of person I trust with my house." "Why would you do this?" It was a fair question. She didn't have a complete answer. There was the loneliness, yes. There was the conversation with Connor about Scottsdale. There was the particular echo Sophia's situation had struck. The young woman alone with a baby, too proud to ask for help, managing on 3 words. And there was something else. Something she hadn't told anyone. Something that had been sitting in her chest since January like a stone she was learning to carry. "Because I can," she said, "and because I've learned recently that if you're going to do something that matters, you shouldn't wait for a better time. There isn't one." Sophia looked at her for a long moment. Owen made a small sound and she adjusted him instinctively, and then she looked back at Maggie with the expression of someone standing at the edge of something and deciding. "Okay," she said quietly. "Thank you." Before she left the airport, Maggie made 2 calls. The first was to Walter Prescott, who had owned the Harbor Light Cafe on the waterfront for 19 years, and who had been, in the imprecise and carefully unnamed way of such things, the person she called when something mattered. Maggie. His voice was warm in the way that had always made her feel slightly and inconveniently known. It's late. What's wrong? Nothing's wrong. I need a favor. She told him about Sophia, briefly, leaving out the details she knew would prompt a lecture about safety from a man who had once made her install a second deadbolt on her front door. There's a young woman going to stay at my house for a couple of weeks, her and her baby. Her name is Sophia Navarro. Will you check on her? If she needs anything, of course I will. Maggie. A pause. Are you all right? You sound... I'm fine, Walt. Just tired. I'll explain everything when I get back. How long are you going to be gone? 2 weeks, she said, and then, before she could stop herself, probably. The second call was to Lily, who answered after 4 rings with the focused voice of someone just woken from the shallow sleep of post-call recovery. Mom, are you here? I thought your flight... It was canceled. I'm still in Portland. I'll reschedule, sweetheart. I'm sorry. A pause. It's okay. I have a double tomorrow anyway. The words were gracious. The tone was the sound of a door being closed very quietly, with great care, so that no one would hear the click. Lily, get some sleep, Mom. We'll figure out the visit. It's fine. After she hung up, Maggie sat in the airport for a while longer. The rain against the terminal windows had softened to something more like mist. She reached into her coat pocket and found, as she had known she would find, the small white pharmacy bag from her stop earlier that week. Inside was her prescription. The label read what it had been reading since January, in the clear, impartial font of pharmaceutical truth. Holloway, Margaret A. Tetrabenazine 12.5 milligrams. Huntington's disease, early stage management. She folded the bag back up and put it in her pocket. 4 months ago, doctor. Patricia Owens had sat across from her in an office that smelled like coffee and hand sanitizer, and told her, in the careful, measured language of a physician who has delivered this particular news before, that what they had found was consistent with early-stage Huntington's. Progressive, degenerative, the tremors she'd been attributing to stress, the occasional word that slipped away from her mid-sentence, the moods that moved through her like weather she hadn't been consulted about. How long? She had asked in a voice that surprised her with its steadiness. Hard to say with certainty. Years, most likely. But the progression varies significantly. She hadn't told Connor. She hadn't told Lily. She told herself it was because she didn't want them coming back out of obligation, because she didn't want to become a problem to be managed, because she wasn't ready. All of those things were true. None of them was the whole truth. The whole truth was that saying it out loud to her children would make it real in a way she still wasn't sure she could survive. And she needed, for just a little longer, to be a person instead of a diagnosis. She took a taxi to a hotel near the airport. She lay on the stiff bed listening to the rain and thinking about Sophia making her way across town with a 5-month-old and a torn bag and a medical textbook toward a house on Westover Hill that was about to be, for the first time in years, full of someone else's life. She did not feel afraid, she realized. For the first time in months, she did not feel afraid. She felt like herself. April came to Portland the way it always did. Rain and pale sunlight taking turns, neither one committing. Maggie sat in the back of a taxi watching familiar streets slide past the rain-streaked window. The bakery on Burnside was still there. The red maple in front of St. Michael's had survived another winter. Portland hadn't changed. But she had. 4 months. She'd left with a 2-week plan and stayed 4 months. First came the visit to Lily in Boston, which had finally happened in January, a week that had turned into something she still didn't have a proper name for. Not reconciliation, not confrontation, just 2 women sitting in a white, sterile kitchen saying true things to each other for the first time in years. Then a detour to Denver to stay with her cousin Patricia, the only person she'd told about the diagnosis, though only in pieces. Then the follow-up appointments with Dr. Owens she couldn't skip, even though every time she sat in that waiting room, she made a point of not looking at the doctor's face too long, afraid of reading something she wasn't ready to know. 4 months, and the whole time the house on Westover Hill had someone living in it. The taxi turned onto the familiar slope and Maggie saw the house. She lost her breath entirely, not because it looked strange, because it looked more like itself than it had in years. The way an old photograph can make you realize you were once more alive than you remembered. The wood siding that had been fading and peeling under Portland's rain was now painted a deep sage green, clean and warm as a forest after a storm. The front porch that had been slowly tilting on a rotted support beam stood level, new lumber pale against the old. And the front garden, the garden Maggie had let go to bare dirt after Robert died because there was no one left to plant things with, was alive. Yellow chrysanthemums lined the front path. Soft lavender bordered the white fence. Pressed against the base of the porch, someone had planted a row of strawberries by hand, each plant spaced with a patience that made Maggie's chest tighten. "Is this the right address, ma'am?" "Yes," Maggie said. "This is it." The front door opened before she reached the steps. Sophia stood in the doorway, Owen on her hip, rounder and heavier now, cheeks full, one small fist enthusiastically reaching toward Maggie the moment he saw her. Sophia looked different, not just healthier, different in a more fundamental way. The exhausted girl who'd sat behind an airport column with guarded eyes was still in there, but standing straighter now, like a tree that had made it through a bad season. "Miss Maggie," Sophia said, and couldn't quite contain the smile. "You're home." Inside, the oak floors had been sanded and refinished, catching the afternoon light and holding it warm and golden. The windows, which Maggie had kept half-drawn for years because washing them felt like too much effort for one person, were clean all the way through. Light poured into the living room like it had been waiting for permission. But what made her go completely still was the hallway. Every photograph she had packed into cardboard boxes after Robert died, because looking at them hurt more than the empty walls did, was back, framed in simple dark wood, hung in careful rows. Robert young and laughing on their wedding day, his tie crooked in the way she had always loved. Connor at 8 years old with a missing front tooth, holding up a fish he'd caught at Sauvie Island like it was the greatest achievement in human history. Lily at her medical school graduation, eyes red from crying, grinning anyway. And at the end of the hallway, in the best light, a photograph she hadn't seen since the early 90s. Herself at 22, painting on a beach somewhere on the Oregon coast, hair loose in the wind, laughing at something off camera. She looked free in it, completely, carelessly free. "Where did you find this one?" She lifted it carefully. "Box in the attic, third one from the left." Sophia's voice was quiet. "You looked so like yourself in it. I thought you needed to see that version of you again." Maggie stood holding the photograph of the woman she used to be, in the hallway of the house she'd almost lost herself in, and didn't trust her voice for a moment. "I'll put it back if you want," Sophia offered. "Don't you dare," Maggie said. They sat at the kitchen table with coffee. Sophia talked quickly, like she'd been rehearsing. She'd found work at Harbor Light Cafe within her first week. Walt had given her the morning shift without blinking, told her she could bring Owen in the back room. Their neighbor, Dorothy Simmons, Dot, who'd lived 2 doors down for 20 years and had apparently been watching the Holloway house through her kitchen window the entire time, had knocked one morning and said, "Honey, I can see you're trying to do too many things at once. Hand me that baby." Sophia had spent evenings and weekends doing the heavy work, painting, sanding, replanting, while Walt helped with anything structural. She placed an envelope on the table. "I kept every receipt. Paint, lumber, the window cleaner, the soil. Everything's in here. You can check it." "Sophia." Maggie put her hand flat on the envelope and slid it back. "I don't need receipts. I just want you to know I know you didn't." Maggie looked at her steadily. "I knew that the day I gave you the keys." Owen, sitting on a folded blanket on the floor, slapped both hands down on the tile and crowed with satisfaction at the sound. Both women looked at him. He looked back with the enormous self-confidence of someone who has recently discovered cause and effect. 9 months now, Sophia said, watching him with that particular mother softness. "He's trying to pull himself up on everything. Walt taught him to clap." Of course Walt did. Sophia set down her coffee mug and looked at Maggie with the expression of someone about to say something they'd been holding for a while. "There's something I need to show you." She led Maggie to the far wall of the kitchen, the wall behind the refrigerator, where a watercolor of the harbor had hung since 1994. A painting Robert had bought at a craft fair in Astoria on their 20th anniversary, paid too much for it, carried it wrapped in his jacket on the ferry ride home. Sophia lifted it carefully off its hook, revealing a neat plaster patch over what had clearly been water damage, the old plaster crumbling from a slow internal leak. "When I opened the wall to fix the leak, I found this." She reached behind the refrigerator and set a rectangular tin on the counter. Red once, now faded to a dull rose, the lid pressed tight with age. Maggie recognized it before she recognized anything else. Robert had bought it at a flea market in Eugene in 1989. She remembered him holding it up, saying he'd use it for fishing tackle. She had never seen it again after that autumn and had eventually stopped wondering where it had gone. "I didn't open it," Sophia said quickly. "I want to be clear. I looked at it and put it back and called Walt and asked him to get word to you. It's not my place, but I thought you needed to know it was there." Maggie stood at the counter with her hands resting on either side of the tin. "Miss Maggie, you look pale." "I'm fine," she said. It was the first lie she had told Sophia. She pried the lid open with fingers that were not entirely steady. Not letters, not photographs. Money. Dozens of small white envelopes, each sealed, each marked in Robert's careful handwriting. A date and a dollar amount. January 1991, $40. March 1994, $65. December 1998, $120. Year after year, all the way to November 2019, 3 months before he died. Her hands shook as she counted. $47,000. Saved in cash, hidden in a wall, over 22 years, in amounts so small she had never once noticed them missing. At the bottom of the tin was a single folded sheet of paper, the blue-lined notepad from his nightstand. His handwriting, which she could still read the way you read a language you grew up speaking. "Maggie, if you're reading this, I'm gone. I'm sorry I couldn't say this out loud. You know I was never good at the big speeches. This is money I set aside over 22 years. A little at a time, so you wouldn't notice. Not for the mortgage, not for the kids' tuition, not for anything practical. This is for Florence. The trip you've been putting off since 1993. The painting classes you said you'd take someday. The someday that kept getting moved to the next year. You spent your whole life making sure everyone else had what they needed. This is yours. Just yours. Don't argue with me. I know you. You'll want to put it towards something sensible. And I am telling you right now, from wherever I am, that if you do that, I will be very disappointed. Go to Florence, Maggie. Take your sketchbook. Eat something ridiculous. Be 22 years old for 2 weeks. You earned it. You earned all of it. Robert." The kitchen was absolutely still. Sophia didn't speak. She didn't move to comfort or explain. She simply stayed, present and quiet, the way people stay when they understand that some moments don't need anything added to them. Owen had fallen asleep on the blanket, one arm thrown over his face in the boneless way that only babies sleep. "His full name," Sophia said finally, very softly. "Owen Robert. I named him Robert for his middle name. I don't know exactly why. I think I wanted him to grow up knowing that a good man doesn't have to be a loud one." Maggie looked up from the letter. She looked at Sophia for a long moment. "He patched his winter coat for 6 years, she said. He said it still had life in it. He was saving it for you. He was saving it for the person I forgot I was." Maggie looked at the photograph she'd carried from the hallway, still in her hand. Herself at 22 on the beach, laughing, free. "When are you going to call your children?" Sophia asked gently. Maggie folded the letter carefully along its original creases. "Tonight," she said. "Both of them. Tonight." She made both calls from the back porch, Portland spread below her in the early evening, the city lights beginning to blink on one by one like someone slowly remembering to breathe. Connor picked up on the second ring. Desk voice, task list voice. "Mom, everything okay?" "Connor." She kept her voice even, steady, the way a table is steady. "I need you in Portland this Saturday. You and Lily in the same room. It's not a request." "Mom, I have a deposition Monday. Saturday. Be here by noon." A pause. She could hear him calculating, running angles. "Is it your health?" "Saturday, Connor." He came. Lily was harder, not resistant. Lily never resisted directly. She deflected, redirected, buried the inconvenient thing under layers of practical concern. Maggie had watched her daughter do this for 30 years and had never called her on it because she recognized the technique too well. She had invented it. "Mom, I just got off a double." "I know. I'm sorry. Lily, I need you home this Saturday. Portland. You and Connor, together." "Mom, are you sick? Did something happen?" "There are things I should have said a long time ago. Come home, sweetheart. Please." The word please, used as a genuine appeal, not social architecture, did it. "I'll get the first flight I can find," Lily said. Connor arrived in a gray suit with a leather carry-on, which was exactly what Maggie had expected. The suit was not arrogance. She understood that now. It was armor. Connor had been putting on armor since he was 18 years old, and she understood, in a way she hadn't before the conversation with Lily in that Boston kitchen, exactly when he had learned to need it. He stepped out of the rideshare and looked at the house. His hand tightened on the carry-on handle. He stood still long enough that the driver pulled away before he moved. Sophia was in the doorway behind Maggie when he came up the path. Owen reached immediately for Maggie's shoulder with both arms and the absolute confidence of someone who has never been denied anything he reached for. Connor looked at Sophia, then at Owen, then at Maggie with the expression of a man who has opened a door he wasn't expecting. "I'm sorry," he said, with the careful, neutral tone of a man choosing his words precisely. "I don't think we've met." "Sophia Navarro," she said, meeting his eyes directly. "I've been staying here while your mother was traveling. It's good to meet you." "Come inside, Connor," Maggie said. He came in, and to his credit, to the credit of whatever was still reachable underneath 36 years of armor, he actually looked at the room. The floors, the windows full of afternoon light, the hallway of photographs, his own 8-year-old face grinning at him from a dark wood frame. Something moved behind his eyes. He controlled it quickly, but she saw it. "Mom," he said quietly, still looking at a photograph of his father. Robert at 40, squinting into morning sun, entirely unaware of the camera. "We need to talk about what's appropriate here. You don't know this woman." "I know her," Maggie said. "Sit down, Connor. Lily will be here soon." Lily arrived 2 hours later, straight from the airport in dark jeans and a hospital sweatshirt, hair pulled back with the efficiency of someone who had learned to get ready in 4 minutes. She walked through the door, stopped, and took the house in the way her brother had, but where Connor had controlled his reaction, Lily's face simply opened. "Oh, Mom," she said softly. "It's beautiful." She crouched to Owen's level immediately, letting him grab her finger, making the low, quiet sounds that people make around babies when they forget to be guarded. Then she stood, looked at Connor, and something passed between them on the frequency that siblings share and parents never fully intercept. "Connor," she said. "Lily," he said back. A beat. Then, "Are you going to tell her, or do I have to?" The air in the room changed. "Tell me what?" Maggie said. Connor said nothing. Finding the frame, she thought. But there was no good frame for this. Lily turned to Maggie. 3 months ago, Connor contacted a senior living facility in Scottsdale, Meadowbrook. He didn't just research it. He put down a deposit. In your name. Without telling you. She kept her voice measured, not unkind, but not soft. "He had a power of attorney form drawn up. He was going to have you sign it during your visit to Boston. He suggested you visit me first because he thought a few weeks away would make you more receptive." "How do you know this?" Connor said. "Your assistant called me by mistake 2 months ago. She thought I already knew." Lily looked at him. "I've been waiting for you to tell Mom yourself." Silence. Maggie looked at her son. "Is it true?" Connor met her eyes. "I was trying to protect you. By making decisions about my life without asking me. You're 60 years old and you live alone on a hill and you gave your keys to a stranger." "Because I still have the right," Maggie said, and her voice was very quiet, which was worse than if it had been loud. "To make my own choices. I am not a case file, Connor. I am your mother." "Mom, did you think I wouldn't find out?" He looked at the floor. "I thought by the time you knew you'd understand it was the right decision." "The right decision for who?" He didn't answer. "For who, Connor?" The silence filled every corner of the room. Sophia had moved quietly to the kitchen doorway with Owen. Lily stood with her arms crossed, not triumphant, just tired of carrying it. "For me," Connor said finally, and his voice, stripped of the attorney's careful control, sounded like something she hadn't heard in 20 years. It sounded like her son. "I've been terrified since Dad died. You handle everything alone. You never ask for help. You never break down. And I don't know how to help you, so He stopped. "I turned it into something I could manage, because that's all I know how to do." "Connor," she said, "you could have called me and said exactly that. That's the whole thing. Just, I'm scared, Mom." He looked at the floor. "I didn't know how to say it." "I know you didn't." She looked at him steadily. Because when your father died, I told you to be strong. I needed you to hold it together. You were 18 years old and I made you a load-bearing wall. Her voice held. That was my failure, not yours. The room breathed. Mom, Lily said quietly, you said there were things you needed to tell us. Yes, Maggie said. Sit down, both of you. She had them sit on the couch. She sat across from them. Through the back window, she could see Sophia on the porch steps with Owen, both of them looking out at the garden, a deliberate, generous act of privacy. Maggie placed a manila folder on the coffee table. 8 months ago, I started having tremors, small ones in my hands. Memory lapses, mood changes I couldn't explain. I thought it was stress. I thought it was grief. She kept her voice even. In January, Dr. Owens confirmed the diagnosis. She opened the folder. Lily leaned forward, read the header, and Maggie watched the color leave her daughter's face in a single slow wave. Mom, the doctor's voice and the daughter's voice arriving at the same moment, tangled together. Huntington's disease. Early stage, progressive. Connor picked up the second page, read it slowly. How long have you known? Since January. It's April. Yes. Why didn't you? He stopped, started again. Why? Because I didn't want you coming back out of obligation. I didn't want to be managed. She looked at Connor directly. And I was afraid that if you knew, it would become an argument for Scottsdale. Connor flinched. She had not said it to wound him, but it was true, and they both knew it. Lily stood up, walked to the window. When she turned back, her eyes were dry and very bright, the brightness of someone holding themselves upright by technique. Mom, do you understand what this means for us? Not the textbook language, the real language, the daughter's language. Connor and I could be next. We each have a 50% chance of carrying the gene, and you waited 4 months to tell us that. 4 months of our lives we could have used to plan, to decide, to... Her voice caught once, then steadied. You took that time from us, even if you meant to protect us. You took it. I know, Maggie said. I know, and I'm more sorry than I know how to say. The three of them sat with that. Outside, Owen laughed at something. The wind in the lavender, probably. The sound came through the glass, small and clear, and entirely indifferent to the weight of everything inside. What do we do now? Connor said. His voice was the quietest she'd heard it in years. Now, Maggie said, we stop keeping secrets. All of us. That's where we start. Walt arrived the next morning with coffee and a box of scones, the way he'd been arriving at this house for the better part of 2 decades. He knocked twice, his knock, the one she could identify through walls, and came in when she called. He stopped when he saw Connor and Lily at the kitchen table, only for a second. Connor, good to see you. It's been a while. Walt. The handshake of 2 people who had always been carefully polite with each other without either one fully acknowledging why. Walt moved through the kitchen the way he always moved through it, knowing without asking where the mugs were, where the coffee things lived, where to set the scone box so it didn't block the counter. He handed Owen a corner of a plain scone, which the baby immediately tried to put in his ear. He said good morning to Sophia and asked about Owen's sleeping and refilled Maggie's mug before she'd said a word. Lily watched all of this. Maggie saw her watching, saw the moment Lily's physician's instinct, trained to read rooms, to notice the behavioral data that tells the true story, clicked quietly into focus. She watched Walt pour coffee without asking how Maggie took it. She watched him navigate the kitchen without opening a single wrong cabinet. She watched the quality of the silence between him and her mother. Not the silence of people with nothing to say, but the silence of people who have said so much over so long that silence has become its own form of conversation. Later, when Walt stepped into the back garden with Sophia and Owen to show the baby the strawberry plants, Lily looked at Maggie. Mom. Don't. How long? A long pause. Since before you were born, Maggie said. She got the tin. She sat both of them down at the kitchen table and read them Robert's letter. All of it. In his handwriting, in his voice, which she could still hear so clearly after 6 years that sometimes she forgot he was gone until the silence reminded her. When she finished, the kitchen was very still. He knew, Connor said finally. About Walt. Yes. He knew Walt was in love with you. Yes. And he saved $47,000 anyway. Connor set the letter down carefully. For you. For after. Your father, Maggie said, was a better man than I have ever had the words for. Lily had been picking up the small envelopes one by one, reading the dates and amounts in silence. March 1997, $40. August 2003, $75. He patched that coat, she said. 6 winters. He said the lining still worked fine. He drove the same truck for 18 years. He brought his lunch every single day. Lily set the envelopes down. He gave up every small thing so you could have one big thing. And you didn't even know. I didn't know. And Walt, all those years, he stayed away out of respect for Dad. Walt is the most loyal person I have ever known. Maggie looked at her hands. After Robert died, I told myself it wasn't appropriate, that it was too soon. And then 1 year became 2 years, and it became easier to call it friendship because friendship didn't require me to be brave. Are you brave enough now? Lily asked. Maggie looked out the window at the garden. Walt crouching to let Owen touch a strawberry plant, Sophia laughing at something he'd said, the lavender moving in the morning wind. I'm going to Florence, she said. In a few months, when I'm well enough to travel comfortably. With Walt. And I'm using every dollar in that tin. Connor looked up. Something shifted in his face. The last layer of armor, the deepest one, finally letting go. He picked up Robert's letter one more time and read the last line. Good, he said quietly. Dad would be furious if you didn't. Attorney James Whitfield arrived on Sunday afternoon. Briefcase, neutral expression, the practiced composure of a man who had sat at a great many kitchen tables for difficult conversations. Everyone was present. Connor and Lily on the couch. Sophia in the armchair with Owen asleep against her shoulder. Walt at the counter. Maggie had asked him to stay, and he had without asking why. I'm making changes to my will, Maggie said. Significant ones. I want everyone to hear them at the same time. She looked at Whitfield. The house, divided into 3 equal parts. Connor, Lily, and Sophia. Connor sat forward. Mom, let me finish. You can't give 1/3 of this house to someone you've known 5 months. I can, and I am. She held his gaze. This house was falling apart when I left. The porch was rotting. The garden was dead. The floors were covered because I couldn't bear to look at them. Sophia gave it back to me. She gave me back the photographs and the light and the garden and a version of myself I'd spent years forgetting. She paused. You can't put a dollar value on that, but you can put a legal one. Connor looked at Sophia. She was looking at Maggie with an expression that had gone very still, the way people go still when something is too large to process in real time. Miss Maggie, she said, I can't. You can. You will. Maggie turned back to Whitfield. Robert's savings, divided 3 ways. One portion establishes the Robert Holloway Medical Scholarship at OHSU. One portion goes to the Huntington's research program there. One portion to Sophia and Owen for a proper start. Mom, Lily said softly, the Harbor Light Cafe building. The deed goes to Walt. She looked at him across the kitchen. You've been running it for 20 years. It was always yours. Walt looked at her. His jaw worked once. Then he looked at the counter and nodded. And Robert's savings, every dollar in that tin, goes to Florence. In the spring, when the weather is good. The kitchen was quiet. Connor sat back. He looked at Sophia. Really looked at her, maybe for the first time since he'd arrived. The medical textbooks on the side table. Owen's small shoes by the door. The careful way she'd hung the photographs in the hallway. Each one level, each one placed with intention. He stood up, crossed the room, stopped in front of her. What made you stay? He said. When my mother gave you the keys, you could have taken what you needed and left. Why did you stay and do all of this? Sophia looked up at him with the careful eyes of someone who had been disappointed enough times not to assume the best prematurely. Because no one had ever shown me that kind of trust before, she said. And I didn't want to be the kind of person who wastes it. Connor was quiet for a moment. I owe you an apology for how I spoke to you when I arrived. You were protecting your mother. I was rude. That's not the same thing. He extended his hand. Welcome to the family. I'm sorry it took me this long. Sophia took his hand, and something in her face, some last-held tension that had probably been there since the airport, since before the airport, since long before any of this, finally let go. 10 days later, the kitchen table again. Lily had driven to OHSU that morning and come back with 2 envelopes. She set them on the table, one in front of herself, one in front of Connor, both sealed. Walt was at the counter. Sophia had Owen on her lap, the baby gnawing thoughtfully on a wooden spoon. Maggie sat in Robert's chair, the one with the slightly shorter leg. "Together," Connor said. "Together," Lily agreed. They tore the envelopes open at the same moment. Connor read his. His shoulders dropped, not collapsed, just released, the way a long-held breath releases. He closed his eyes for exactly 3 seconds. "Negative," he said. "No mutation detected." Lily was still reading. She read it twice. Maggie watched her daughter's face and knew before Lily said a single word. "Positive." Her voice was completely steady, the steadiest voice in the room. "I carry the gene." Connor was on his feet before she finished the sentence. He sat beside her and put his arm around her, and she let him, which was itself something, because Lily had not let anyone hold her since she was 11 years old. "Don't tell me it's going to be okay," she said. "I'm not going to say that." "Don't tell me we'll figure it out." "I'm just going to sit here," he said. "That's all?" Owen looked up from his wooden spoon, looked at Lily, reached out and patted her knee twice with the solemn purposefulness of someone administering comfort he had no words for yet. Lily laughed, a cracked, wet sound that was also somehow entirely real. She looked at him. "Thank you, buddy," she said. 10 years, Maggie said quietly. "Maybe 15 before symptoms. Lily, that is time." "I know. Not time to wait. Time to live." Lily wiped her face with the back of her hand, looked at the test result one more time, folded it carefully, put it in her pocket. "I'm going to leave Boston," she said. "Come home. Work part-time on the Huntington's research program here." She looked at Maggie. "And I'm going to write the book I've been not writing for 6 years." "What book?" Connor asked. "About medicine and family and what it means to really live when you know your time is limited." She looked at her mother. "I have a good subject. The 6 months that followed were not easy, but they were real, which turned out to be better than easy in ways Maggie hadn't expected." Lily gave notice in Boston. Connor drove up from Chicago twice before Christmas without being asked, both times without the leather briefcase, both times in the cable-knit sweater. Sophia started her 4th year at OHSU in January, Owen in a campus daycare 3 mornings a week, Walt watching him the other 2. Dot Simmons continued her standing arrangement of showing up when needed and pretending it was no trouble. Walt came for dinner every Thursday, then Thursdays and Sundays. Then most evenings, staying on the back porch after the others had gone to bed, the 2 of them sitting in the dark with Portland glowing below, not needing to explain anything to each other because there was nothing left that needed explaining. In March, they went to Florence. 2 weeks, sketchbook in her bag, Robert's money in her account, Walt beside her on every cobblestone street. She painted every day, badly at first, then less badly. She ate things she couldn't name. She sat for an entire afternoon in front of a Botticelli that made her cry without knowing why. She was 22 years old for 2 weeks, exactly as Robert had wanted. It was a Sunday in late November when Maggie sat on the back porch in the wicker chair and understood that she had everything she needed. Her hands trembled more than they used to. Words caught sometimes, snagged somewhere between thought and voice. But her mind was clear, still hers. Inside the house, Sunday was happening. Connor's voice from the kitchen, deeper than Robert's but with the same particular laugh, the one that came out when he forgot to be composed. Lily answering him, sharp and warm. Sophia correcting someone's knife technique with the patient authority she'd developed from months of Harbor Light prep work. Owen's running commentary on everything, enthusiastic and entirely without consonants, the voice of someone who has a great deal to say and is working on the infrastructure. Walt sat beside her. His hand covered hers on the armrest, not dramatically, not as a statement. Just there, the way he had always been there. "Warm enough?" he asked. "Stop asking me that. I'll stop when you start dressing for the weather." "Florence was warm," she said. "Florence was extraordinary." "Do you regret it?" she asked him. The question she asked sometimes. "All the time we lost." "I regret the time," he said. "Not one single day of loving you. Never that." The back door opened. Owen came through it at full speed, 15 months old and committed to running everywhere, arms out, face set in an expression of pure forward momentum. He made it 4 steps before his legs lost the argument with gravity, and he sat down hard on the porch boards. He looked at his hands, looked up at Maggie. "Mama," he said with complete confidence that this would fix everything. "Come here, baby," she said. He pulled himself up using her knee and stood there holding on, looking out at the garden with the proprietary satisfaction of a person who intends to explore every inch of it once he gets the running thing properly sorted. Sophia appeared in the doorway. "Oh, and Robert, you were supposed to stay—" She stopped, looked at her son standing at Maggie's knee in the November light. Didn't finish the sentence. "Come sit with us," Maggie said. And then Lily was there, and Connor behind her, and Walt poured the last of the coffee into mismatched mugs and handed them around, and they were all on the porch together in the late autumn light, this impossible, broken, remade family, watching Owen discover that the lavender moved if you blew on it, spending the next 5 minutes blowing on everything to test the theory, laughing every time. Later, after everyone had gone to bed except Walt, Maggie opened the notebook she had been keeping since January. She turned to the last page and wrote slowly, the letters larger than they used to be, slightly uneven, entirely hers. "To whoever finds this, I have lived 60 years. I have loved deeply and badly and well. I have kept secrets that nearly cost me everything that mattered. But in the end, in these last months, which have been the truest months of my life, I learned this. Family is not only who you're born to. Family is who you choose, and who chooses you back, and who stays anyway when the choosing gets hard. If someone has made you feel invisible, know that it is not too late. It is never too late to choose honesty over silence, love over fear, life over mere existence. I have Huntington's disease. I am dying. But in these last months, I have been more alive than I was in the 20 years before them. Don't wait for the perfect moment. This is the perfect moment. Now. Always now. Margaret Holloway, Portland, Oregon." She closed the notebook. Owen, still asleep inside, made a small sound in his sleep that was possibly a word and possibly just contentment. Walt reached over and turned off the porch light. They sat in the dark together, Portland glowing below them, the late November air clean and cold, the lavender standing still now that the wind had gone quiet. It was enough. It was more than enough. It was everything.